slide, I pointed out a couple key points of the zoning code as it relates to the central business district. So for downtown development and redevelopment, that also has to meet downtown design standards, also trying to minimize traffic congestion, and then also having low impacts to adjacent commercial and residential properties. So here you can see some of the permitted uses that we currently have in our central business district. We have barbershops, bookstores, some of those novelty and food grocery items, restaurants, clothes-oriented businesses like dry cleaning, laundronettes, hardware and garden supply, medical and dental clinics, offices, and then small fix-it repair shops and tobacco shops. Then for conditional uses, they have antenna towers, auto services like car washes and auto body repairs, building material storage yards, daycare centers, drive-in or sidewalk cafe establishments, hotels and motels, multiple dwellings, so apartment buildings essentially, nursing homes, parking ramps, vet clinics, and warehouses. So the proposed ordinance that I've attached to the case tonight included a few businesses that have come forward to the city of Victoria and are interested in moving into the central business district, such as dance studios and tattoo parlors. Bars would also be another addition since we already allow restaurants. Most communities have restaurants and bars paired together in permitted uses in their central business districts. And then for conditional uses, breweries, and then also removing planned unit developments. And then just a general housekeeping item, organization for alphabetizing the conditional accessory uses, similar to how the permitted uses are formatted. So just for some examples of what other cities allow in their central business district that aren't addressed in ours, here's some examples on the screen for permitted uses. We have financial institutions, insurance or retail or real estate offices, liquor stores, multiple dwellings, photo studios and print shops, public facilities like libraries, post office, fire stations, retail, shopping centers, and wedding chapels. And then some surrounding communities in their conditional uses allow art studios or ceramic shops, a couple different forms of smaller breweries like brew pubs and micro distilleries, as well as entertainment facilities like a bowling alley or a movie theater, and then large-scale retail and small wireless technology. So some discussion points for you all tonight. Are the new additions that staff have proposed acceptable, and the organization of the ordinance? Also, what are some other permitted or conditional uses that you might like to see with the ordinance when we bring it forward for a public hearing? And then also, are there any current uses that you would like to see changed or removed? So with that, staff can stand for questions, but looking forward to some discussion from you all tonight.
Great. What is the removal of the planned unit developments?
Yes, Commissioner, so the removal of planned unit developments, we currently have those as a conditional use in the central business district. But a conditional or a removal of a planned unit development, sorry, my apologies. A planned unit development is a separate application entirely. It's a rezoning application. So to have a land use application be a conditional use when it already has its own separate processes just doesn't make sense. In my opinion, I don't believe planned unit development should have ever been incorporated as a conditional use because they are their own separate application with their own processes. So this is more of a housekeeping item.
So this is like belt and suspenders, having it here. It doesn't need to be here.
Yeah.
Everybody's comfortable that it's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. The Planning Commission and the City Council actually has more authority over a zoning change, such as a planned unit development or a rezoning versus a conditional use. So if anything, you're giving yourselves more authority here.
Got it. Another question. Our reference to restaurants, how does it not include restaurants serving alcohol? Does it include restaurants serving alcohol?
Not as far as I can tell. So that's another housekeeping item. Essentially, we have restaurants in town that serve liquor, right? It's a restaurant and a bar. We don't just have any or we do have some restaurants that don't serve liquor, but this would just be making those uses conforming with our code.
Excuse me, but I feel like it's general if you say restaurants and bars. So that would mean that you could have a bar completely standalone without a restaurant, I guess is what would concern me. That would just be a bar.
Sure. As far as I'm aware, bars in Minnesota are allowed to serve food in some capacity, so they typically go hand in hand with each other.
But
I can double check that before we,
aren't there regulations on like the percentage of revenue you get from what you're selling? So a bar, you don't need to sell as much food as a restaurant. You need to have a certain percentage of revenue based off food. So
yeah, I'm sure that's a requirement, so we can look into that as well.
I guess my point is I don't particularly like calling out bars on their own to be able to be taking up real estate downtown as a standalone bar. I think everybody likes restaurants, and as a community, restaurants that are able to serve alcohol, I'm sure, is part of it. But I don't know if there's any current codification of the percentage of revenue that has to be derived. I bet you other cities.
Mankato, I think, is something like that. That's how I.
That's something we can absolutely look into. And if the commission isn't comfortable with having bars included in general, that's something we can always eliminate too.
I think initially, if we look at historical, Einke Brewing opened just serving beer. And then as they grew their establishment and then moved their location, they added food service to what they did. And I think that we want to be careful about excluding maybe a new business owner that might come in and slowly build up their business and add to it, because that could happen the same way that Einke did. I know that's a little different because it would have went under the brewery category. And I get what you're saying from a family standpoint. You don't want to, dance club that only serves after 10 p.m., shots in the CBD necessarily.
Right.
But I think there's probably a way to, the way this looks like it's written, bars in conjunction with restaurants, it sounds like it would only be if it had a restaurant as well, the way it is here.
The way that I've stated it in the draft ordinance just says restaurants and bars, so I think one could interpret that as one or the other.
One or the other.
But if we could have it say
Bar and
bar
restaurant.
in conjunction with a restaurant, right? Or something like Commissioner Westman had stated about the percentage requirements, that's something we can absolutely work into this draft.
Or what would be defined as a family restaurant,
Okay.
I think would be a designation.
Well, when you think of Floyd's, that wouldn't be a family restaurant.
wouldn't
And
be a
if you think of Vic's, that wouldn't be a family restaurant. So I think, and those are very important to the community. I mean, they do provide,
Yep.
a good service, even if you just get takeout, so you don't have to take the kids there. But I think we want to be careful of people delineating it family, because what happens if then, we already have things in that are not compliant then necessarily.
Did you have inquiries specifically on standalone bars?
No.
No.
No, this was a staff presented option just because a lot of surrounding communities also have restaurants and bars in their definition. So this was just trying to blend with surrounding communities, but if the commission isn't supportive of it, we can always take it out.
I'm trying to think of a bar that doesn't have food. Like, I'm just really like, but I think maybe some in like Carver might not. I'm trying to think of one.
But I mean, when you have a bar that just serves pizzas or something simple behind, I mean, really, it's just a bar.
Yeah.
And you don't have that kind of family draw to the downtown if it's just a bar.
Well, aren't there state regulations as far as the age of somebody that can go into a bar, whether they serve food or not?
And there's timing, I think, the 7 p.m. with, like at Floyd's, I think if you're a certain age at 7 p.m. on certain days, you have to get out. Maybe not anymore.
Is that right? I didn't know that.
I think it would be interesting for us to understand before we really decide how this should be written is what are the state regulations regarding bars, restaurants, how are they actually defined?
Yep.
And could we align with that terminology so that we actually have that. I think that probably warrants
Yeah,
a little bit of research.
I agree.
So, and the other thing that, that this is stating is that we're excluding drive-ins. Not that I object to that, but that would essentially eliminate a McDonald's type.
That's something that's already in the zoning code today for restaurants. I'm not sure if there's any staff support to eliminate that from the downtown district because we're supposed to have, it's for walking compatibility. You know, if you, and limiting congestion, as I pointed out in the beginning of the presentation, and having drive-throughs would increase traffic in the area, so.
Yeah, I would suggest it should be in there.
So one of the things that I wondered with that is what we are seeing with most retail is that they do have a drive-up component. For instance, even an Aldi at 25,000 square foot has 6 to 8, drive-up grocery location or parking spaces. So I think if we really, as a community, are driven to have a grocery store in the CBD, even if it's down on the 13 acres, and I think that we can probably most say that is something we desire, then we want to be really careful of how we put that drive-in component, because I would say that many are finding that even after COVID, they're getting much of their retail purchases done that way.
Yeah.
For reasons of weather.
Yeah, but I don't think a drive-in or a pickup component would be considered a drive-in.
Yeah,
I think they're calling it drive up
yeah.
Yeah.
most commonly. So
And for pickup and for takeout, and I think
Yeah.
that's separate.
I think we
This-
just want to make sure that they're delineated.
Yeah, this is specifically for restaurants, so if we were going to have a retail
Yeah.
excluding drive-in or drive-up, then that would be the
different.
situation
Okay,
that you're speaking of,
perfect.
but.
Are you excluding drive-in bars, drive-up bars? I mean, they have them in Texas.
They do.
Drive
They're
up to the
so
window.
cool.
That's a, I mean, when
Hot
you,
day, go up and get your beer.
But you can also, after COVID, they allowed you to take things out from restaurants.
The way this
we
is
don't-
formatted is if it was restaurants and bars, exactly as it's shown on the screen here, dash excluding drive-in. So I would say that would qualify for bars as well. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that was my question is this drive-in a drive-through? Because basically every coffee shop now won't exist without having a drive-through.
I thought that too, because if Mocha Monkey really wants to come in, they would want to drive through. They wouldn't come in
Drive-through,
without
yeah.
one.
Other CBD across the street, which, or well, I guess it's part of the Central Business District, Part 1, but I was just thinking coffee shops, but would coffee shops be included under the bullet point bars? And then to Al's point is, I've never seen a drive-in bar in my life, but I guess they have them in Texas.
do have
So,
They don't even call them, they call them beer,
think that's a-
beer barns.
there's
think
like
that's a
3
state
drive-ins in the state
regulated.
of Minnesota.
Yeah, it's state regulated because you can't take it. We wouldn't be able to do it here.
Right.
Commissioner Pedersen, to address your question, we do allow establishments of the drive-in type as a conditional use currently within our central business district. So there is a way to process a drive-in. It's just not permitted.
Yeah, I just would want to make sure that for a place like Mocha Monkey or Starbucks or Caribou, whoever wanted one of those would have the ability to have a drive-through, not necessarily a drive-in. I was thinking drive-in movie theater.
I think it's.
Would be cool.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is one of the uses where it says drive-ins are allowed except movie theaters.
Movie theaters.
There's only 4 left in the state.
No.
Anyway, all right. Thank you for clearing that up for me.
I had one suggestion just on terminology under permitted uses where we say number 8 drugstores. I wonder if we want to maybe update that to pharmacies or pharmacy/drugstore, so it's a little bit more articulated, just based on the fact that now we could have a marijuana dispensary that would be a drugstore necessarily. They might get a little confusing.
That's a good point.
Do we want to rule out dispensaries?
Yeah, that's another point.
That is a future broader discussion that I'm not prepared for tonight.
Yeah, that's why I saw tobacco on there. I'm like, well, I think tobacco shops are gonna start to.
Does anybody have a
Distribute.
problem with the dance studio?
So interesting, like where it says dance studios, there was a dance studio in Victoria in the CBD in the building where Ruby's Roost is, but it was like Rising Star Children's Dance Academy
Studio West.
in the past. Yeah, there's been a couple. So, but I don't know. The way depends on how you interpret it, I guess.
What's commonly defined as, I think, is
Yeah.
kind of the key.
Yeah, there may need to be a little more definition there, but I think having that type of dance studio or,
There is already a dance studio in the building that has Enkai as well. Studio West is there currently, so that like they would just be getting them up to code or whatever.
I think that's fine. Not so excited about the tattoo parlors ones.
Okay.
To be honest.
Is that one in line just with surrounding communities, or is there any tattoo parlors that want to come in?
Both. So surrounding communities also allow tattoo parlors in various forms, either permitted or conditional. And then we also did have a business reach out to us recently about opening a space in downtown.
Could we put it under conditional so we have a little more control?
Yes.
Doesn't that kind of
That's an
solve
option.
the issue?
Yep. I think that's a good change.
Okay.
I agree.
Anything else that, that stands out, pro or con?
On the conditional, I have one that I think we should remove. You have it revised to number 1, which is the adult uses as regulated in Article 8.6. I went back into 8.6 and looked through it, and I couldn't think of any reason why that would need to be in Victoria permitted or conditionally.
Yeah, that's something we can absolutely look into. It's pretty standard to list out adult uses in zoning codes, but I'm not sure that we have to allow them in any of our districts. That's something I'll have to run by the city attorney to verify, though.
Let's do it.
Okay.
I think so too. Under tobacco shops, does it need to be like tobacco? I think about like now everybody's moving to vape cartridges. I don't know much about it, but I always think that, I don't know if that's still considered a tobacco shop or just leave it at that, or
I mean, we also need to consider that
because of that.
that and its parallels with CBD and marijuana dispensary, because that there's a vape shop over by Heartbreakers. They've got all sorts of stuff in that place that I'm
Yeah,
questioning whether we would just want to let that flow in here with a tobacco shop.
yeah, there's one in Eden Prairie where I work out, and it's pretty interesting, the
Yeah.
ins and outs.
So would tobacco shop be considered just as like a general smoke shop as well?
Correct, essentially.
The tobacco shop already, sorry to say, the tobacco shop already sells
CBD.
marijuana edibles, not just CBD. So
Oh, they do?
This one here,
I know.
Churchill's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Big signs in the window. It's pretty hard to miss that. Be good to get that unprepared discussion
Yeah.
primed up for us, because I think it's very close to being here.
Sure.
I think it is. Yeah, yeah, throughout the country. I think that we now have the opportunity to either vote up or vote down at the same time too, so,
Yeah, and tonight we're just looking for some feedback. You don't have to make a vote on anything. This is
Yep.
really good feedback that we're getting. So we appreciate that. So when we feel like we're getting close to a draft and we'll bring back another version for you guys before we start advertising for a public hearing.
Sorry, go ahead. One more question on the conditional, the sidewalk cafes. What, why is it in conditional versus regular permitted? The sidewalk cafe they have a rented square foot in a building to have a sidewalk cafe, right?
In most cases, yeah. I'm guessing this was pre-COVID when this was adopted, where a lot of the food establishments, as you probably remember, weren't allowed to have indoor seating at the time. So some of our downtown businesses converted to outdoor seating. This might be one that we could potentially look at taking away, since some of our downtown businesses are already utilizing this. If that's something you want us to look into as well, we can do that.
Why not?
What does the corn vendor qualify as?
Food?
Yeah, so
Did you say corn?
Yeah.
Okay.
One by,
Yeah.
Like
The
a
one
back
that's-
of your truck type of corn vending?
it's
No, the one
like a
that's
pop-up corn shop.
cabin fever.
I get my cantaloupe there like twice a week.
Okay. Need to go by there.
Yeah, good cantaloupe.
Tip.
Say that's like a mobile food unit versus like a solicitor or a peddler or a sidewalk cafe in this.
Do they get licensed?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Is there, sorry, are permits for those in food trucks and all that kind of?
We don't have a permit process currently for those.
They're just allowed.
I'm not sure, to be honest. So maybe that's something else we look into as well.
Yeah, that was one of the things I had in my notes, was the food trucks, and certainly in most major cities around the country, the food trucks are just absolutely dominate in the central part of the city. There's, literal traffic jams with them at the same time, so that's certainly something that, if we're not dealing with it today, we will want to address that because, and I would think that the licensing, is the way that you control it. Isn't that how typically a municipality would address that?
Yes, in the community that I worked for previously, they had a separate permit for food trucks. So I'm not aware of any with the city of Victoria, but I can
No,
talk to the city clerk and see if that's something we'd be interested in starting.
Are food trucks regulated by the state?
Correct. I believe
would
actually
be-
county,
Is it county?
per county. Yeah.
So we'd just be doing the same,
County
multiplying efforts that we don't need to multiply.
So does
Like
that
the
mean
belt
that-
with suspenders.
So does that mean it could get a permit from the county and then just come into the city at will?
As long as they're complying with county regulations and have a license with them, then,
And parking regulations.
yeah.
Interesting.
The only food truck I can think that comes in on a commercial basis is at the Apple House when the donut and cider food truck comes there.
There's a few for like softball games and
Oh, yeah.
other events.
For the Lions softball.
Yeah, around, but at this
It's
stage, in my
pretty
opinion,
limited.
they're pretty rare.
I think it'd be nice. We'd have some variety.
Yeah, right.
As a
Maybe if we
quick
put it in
side
there, then people will come.
Which that wouldn't be anything in zoning code, that
No.
would be its own separate
just permit.
licensing. Yeah, we wouldn't want to make a mobile food unit a permitted or a conditional use, because then they're just taking up spots for brick and mortar, so,
We already have an issue.
yeah. So,
As a quick tongue-in-cheek comment, I'd suggest we think about changing an acronym, I guess, CBD for Central Business District, just in future planning and CBD conversations.
sure, maybe we just eliminate that acronym altogether and just call it the Central Business District.
We could just say downtown.
Downtown? Yeah.
and the proposal for the coffee shop and clinic at all off of 5. Is that defined as within the central business district?
Central Business District extends down to Steiger and 5.
But does it go across the,
No.
off 5?
No, I can
The
pull up.
other side?
I can pull up a map here quickly.
That was zoned
think that
for
would be a
something
CUP.
else, and there was a discussion about having to rezone that area because it was zoned for, I can't remember what, but.
So everything in the dark red here is the Central Business District. So you can see it extends to one property across Highway 5 here, but
The dental office or whatever. is
yeah,
in there.
otherwise that's
Yep.
that's the extent of it.
Cool.
Good, any other comments?
Anything else?
Nope, not for me.
Now is the opportunity.
I noticed you also have in the conditional uses automobile car washes. Would that include like the drive-through car washes or just the seeing how we have that other policy towards drive-throughs?
Correct. So we have a fuel station in town that already has a drive-through car wash attached to it. So that would be whether it's a freestanding car wash or a car wash attached to a gas station.
All right.
Superb. Hearing no more discussion, unless there is more discussion.
No, I said move
Okay.
on.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next agenda item on the agenda. Our second discussion item on our agenda tonight is item 3.2. Discuss a process improvement ordinance. And I'll turn it over to Brian.
Thank you, Acting Chair. As mentioned tonight, we're here to discuss a proposed ordinance for process improvements. So the intention is simply to, simplify some processes for land use applications that we currently have in the zoning code and the municipal code, as well as correcting some minor discrepancies that are applicable to planning processes. So for the subdivision ordinance, there's a sentence that you probably noticed in there about limiting the heritage and significant tree credits for the required tree mitigation for wooded parcels. What this is essentially doing is preventing double dipping into the significant tree credit and the wooded parcels credit. So as it's interpreted, we had a developer recently that said, well, can I apply these trees to both of these, where that's really not the intention of it. It's supposed to be counted in two separate ways. So this is just clarifying that. And then also modifying the minor subdivision requirements to limit the number of lots within a 3-year period. So as a minor subdivision currently exists that allows someone to divide a property into 4 parcels or less in a single instance, what we'd be doing with this code change, we'd prevent a major plat being facilitated through multiple minor subdivisions. So one parcel gets one minor subdivision every 3 years. So if a developer wanted to come in and divide a 40-acre parcel into however many lots, they could just do it one after the other through a minor subdivision. This would prevent that and require them to go through the major plat process. And then the zoning ordinance. So site plan and building materials, that's a current application that we have for land use review, but we don't have a process established in code yet. So that's what this would be doing. And then also addressing some responsibilities for you as it deals with appeals and variances. And then also the zoning text amendment currently in code. Members of the public aren't technically allowed to apply for them, but we have done that in the past, so that's something we just want to formalize in code so that members of the public can apply for a zoning text amendment if they wish. And then also removing PUDs as a conditional use, which we talked about in the last discussion item, and then also removing PUD review from the Planning Commission's responsibilities. So as it stands right now, you don't review final plats. All this would be is taking away final PUDs as well. So you wouldn't be seeing any final component of a development. So a couple discussion points similar to the last item. Are the proposed ordinance changes acceptable? Are there any that you would like us to look into? And then lastly, that last point I mentioned, what are your thoughts on reviewing final plats and final PUDs to get a consensus if you have any differing thoughts or if you'd like those to go straight to council in the future? So with that, I'll stand for questions.
Commissioners?
Has council weighed in whether they prefer the final plats and the final PUDs to skip over planning commission?
We've discussed with each of them individually and they said it's up to you guys. So they don't have a preference one way or another.
I had a general question for you. This might not be the perfect forum for it, but are there things that are going to council that are being reviewed extensively twice, once by the planning commission and then again by city council? And I don't know how busy city council's agenda and workload is, but things where we could maybe delegate some things to be final approvals or decisions actually made at the planning commission level versus everything having to go to the city council. Has that been discussed?
Yes, so specifically final plats, in other communities that I've worked for, final plats have typically been a consent item. It reduces the number of items on a regular agenda for the council, and it's something that just goes through quickly. And then in other communities I've worked for as well, variances have been strictly planning commission review. So that's something we could explore and ask the council if they're interested in transferring those specifically to the planning commission only, and then appeals would go through them. You wouldn't be appealing your own decision if someone were to
Right,
request an appeal.
yep.
So the theory of the whole structure is that we're the research group for the city council. We do all of the technical research that goes into, for example, a development. And if we make any errors or if we read something wrong, for example, that's a problem. But our work is primarily, and correct me if you disagree, Brian, but our work is primarily as the technical research group. And if this development works, then we approve it. If we don't approve of the development, we look at what should be changed, and then it comes back.
Acting Chair Iverson, that is correct. You guys are essentially the recommending body on planning items for the city council, so.
I'm just wondering if there's certain
Redundancy.
items, and maybe it's not that specific example, but other items, maybe they're more administrative, maybe they're more, procedural, but they're not something that needs a lot of research and needs a lot of background, that we can cut the approval chain off here and move along to make it more efficient for the city council. I don't know what those items would be, but I assume there are probably some that could be handled here and not have extensive research and discussion.
Yeah,
I think
that's
the
a,
workload will only increase, and it'll only increase dramatically, so the efficiency, I mean, that's an excellent point, yeah.
for another consideration as it relates to final plats and PUDs as well. There's a 3-step phase for any major plat. So you have the sketch plat, which usually goes through a couple iterations before it gets to your guys' level or it gets to the preliminary level. And then at that phase, it once again comes back to you and the council. And the way it stands right now, if a final plat has a PUD component, it once again goes back to you and the council. So you're essentially looking at each project a minimum of 3 times.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have experience in other cities that you've seen what works really well in this structure, and maybe if you recommend something that might be helpful to the city council's workload and something we can help out doing. I don't think our workload has been too overwhelming since I've been a part of this, and so if there's something we can help out with.
And I would be of the thought that the final plats and the PUDs and development within the city of Victoria, the more eyes on it, probably the more often, the better. I don't think, I mean, I think, you know, city council are very busy as well, and they have a lot coming their way. And I would think that if I was on the council, I would like another body looking at it, making recommendations, bringing up things, so that a developer doesn't get down the road with something without those stones being turned over. That would be my preference if I was on the council. And I think that most people on city councils will say that they look pretty deeply into the planning commission's conversations, their recommendations, and what's put out there, just so that they can understand not only, like, because a lot of times we don't have, you know, public input. And so we're pressed to bring up all the things that might not be the way we would want them, or recommend things that could be changes that could be to the positive. So I wouldn't necessarily want to throw it straight through to the council. And I think that when we see a preliminary plat, it's nice to see the changes that they've made to that. And if they've been heard, and then have those recommendations like on record of, thank you for, you know, making sure that berm was 9 foot high, or whatever it is, so that the council can easily absorb that, to know what, you know, that we've recommended, they've listened, they've adapted, and now we recommend they go.
Yeah, and to your point, last council meeting, that we asked the developer to follow up on a bunch of things we asked him, and if I was on city council, I would have wanted to hear city planning commission ask those questions to make sure they followed through on all the things we wanted, so I think that makes sense.
Especially with the city experiencing such rapid growth, I think it would be for the best, like you said, to have as many eyes on it as possible. So when it does eventually get to council, it can be the most optimal, least problematic draft of the plat or PUD.
Now, it's either, it's my understanding that either most or all of the city council members do review the tapes of the planning commission. And they do go through the same detail that we've already discussed. And if they see anything in there, you know, Brian can probably address that more accurately, working with both groups. But, so it does get a fair amount of screening. You know, before it gets to the city council, and I think that's the good news, and that's, you know, another set of eyes and that are tracking the whole thing, so.
And I will say, from the developer standpoint, because I've been on the other side of this, I liked going to planning commission and getting that feedback, and then bringing it back and saying, hey, we heard you, we listened to you, and these are the changes that we've made based on what you said, because we want to be a good partner with the city.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, that does tend to develop a better project for the community.
Can I ask a real world example? Hunter's Glen, was that a final plat or a preliminary plat last meeting?
Last meeting, that was a final
I
plat.
know,
The reason it had to come before the planning commission is because our zoning code currently states that final PUDs have to be reviewed by you before going to the
Gotcha.
council. So
the
in this,
majority of
in this
us-
scenario, what I've presented here tonight would be taking away that final PUD review component for the planning commission. So you wouldn't have even had to review Hunter's Glen at the last meeting.
But
That
that's
was,
good.
that was kind of where I was going.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that was one where we said, we pulled up the agenda, did you knock these out? And kind of prove it, and they did, and, you know, but that continuity of, we asked these questions to be addressed, did you address them? Now, we ask these questions, and then we give that final plat approval with those conditions, they go up to the next level, and that's your job, so it's not, but, you know.
yeah, I think the efficiency and the minimal bureaucracy, you know, certainly in the process is advantageous for all.
What's the delay, 2 weeks, if it has to come to us, basically?
Essentially, yes, which sometimes for a developer, that makes or breaks a project. So,
It'll take them 4 months to get their financing. We're probably fine.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really,
Yeah.
realistically, they're not, yeah.
I don't know, from a selfish standpoint and seeing the final aspects, I like to see the final piece, but if there was a compelling reason other than a 2-week delay for us not to see it, I think that it'd be fine to pass it to the city council, but I don't know. Sorry, my viewpoint, continuity, I'd like to see the finals on both of them.
Hey, no problem at all. I'm looking for feedback, so I appreciate it all.
Has there been an example of where that extra 2 weeks has broken a deal with the developer or anyone?
Not to my knowledge, but I'm sure it's happened somewhere.
For other processes, there's been a few instances in which a developer has said, I need to, be 50 feet tall or, have features X, Y, and Z in order for the project to be viable. I've yet to see any proof that those are just not baseless claims, and we take them at their word, which I'm sure maybe they're being truthful. Is there any kind of process we could add where someone could look into that? I mean, like, I studied economics a ton. I'm sure I would be able to understand some stuff around the viability of a business. I don't know.
I think that gets a little murky because it's up to the developer, right, on when they're bringing an investment into the city, how much money that they're going to receive in the long run for doing this, what's going to be financially feasible for them. I mean, a developer's not going to go into a project if they're going to lose money on it, and if they're saying they're going to lose money if they're not getting a certain number of units, then
Right. I mean, that's
staff
the
is the
point,
one
though.
to
Like, we're just
regulate that.
we're just taking them at their word, and so someone could come and say, yeah, I need to be 5 stories to be viable when they could have been viable at 3 stories, and we just.
I think the other piece of that is that the pro forma for any project is developed by the developer. And so all of those assumptions are created by the developer and or their architect, their contractors, their engineers. It would be very difficult for us to proof them not true. We could,
It wouldn't be necessarily to prove them not true as much as it would be to just like see. I would just be interested in see what they're doing and ask and have questions on it. Like, maybe I'm the only one who's interested in seeing that.
No, I think that's a good point, but the ultimate responsibility is to then not approve the variance, and then see if they come back with a change, or they say we're gonna shut this project down, then I mean, we ultimately have to be able to say no to projects when somebody says, well, it's probably not profitable then. So, okay, well, sorry, we don't wanna approve that variance in height. Or,
Based on my experience, of course, it goes through staff, and it goes through various levels of staff. And staff has a responsibility to present to the planning commission. And so, staff has looked through it, and then we become the next level and say, lot number 5 really doesn't work on this. And the overall project may well make sense, but lot number 5 doesn't. And it goes back to staff, and then staff says, okay, so here we are, developer, back to the drawing board, so to speak. So, I think that in principle, the planning commission's objectives is to make things happen, and to make things happen with the developer, and make things happen within the confines of the parameters that are statutes at the same time. And so, to have, so it goes through Brian and his people, and then they deliver it to us. and then we then break it down.
I haven't seen it.
Essentially break it down twice.
I haven't seen it delivered to us yet, though. As I guess what I'm getting at, like I haven't. It's every time I've asked why they're doing something, they'll say if they say economic value, like it's not profitable otherwise. I haven't seen anything delivered to us about why it's not profitable if they have 5 floors instead of 3 or whatever it is. You know, I haven't seen anything like that. So, I found a lot of the things that they have said to be dubious in the sense like I just find a lot of them to be they're paying a consulting firm who gives them the answer they want. And so like
My worry from a staff perspective is that if we incorporate something into code that says we're not going to allow a project unless you're attaining the lowest financial feasibility to make the project work, that crosses some gray areas in my opinion.
well, it wouldn't have to be that. I'm just asking. Like, so we'll say we recommend approving this if, you know, you satisfy X, Y, and Z. Could I not just say I would recommend, or I'd make a motion to approve this if you can show that it is unfeasible to do it? If you actually meet, like, why do we have variances and city code if we just allow everyone to not follow it?
Well, do we ask everybody to provide a profit and loss statement to say, hey, I'm gonna make this much on this project or lose this much? I mean, I don't think we want to get into that.
And it's not asking to do that for everyone. It's just if
For
some,
anyone, it doesn't matter. Ask it for one, you want to ask it for all, and you want to get into the financial aspects of their business, I think you're looking at a whole different area.
if someone is going to build something that does not meet our current code, and they say they have to do it because it is not profitable to do it otherwise, well, I guess like I would just be interested in seeing the argument.
I think that is our ability to, if we don't feel like the project, I mean, our concern isn't their profitability. Our concern is the fact that the project either fits or doesn't fit within the code and the outlines of the city as we have them before us.
Right.
And if we think that it doesn't, I think we each need to be confident, even though John says our job is to get things done, but I think our job is to get the right things done for the city. And that's why we're here. That's this layer, is to make sure that we are listening to the public and making sure we're doing the right things. So if you feel like 5 stories, regardless of feasibility, is the wrong thing for Victoria, then you should say no.
Correct. So as I mentioned in our one-on-ones a while ago, staff's objective or our purpose is to process requests as they come in, and that's what it is. It's a request. If someone were to come in and request a 10-story building and they have to get a variance for that, and that's not agreeable to you guys, that's totally within your realm to recommend denial of that variance. So you can review a project based on certain components, but you have to review it against our code.
Yes.
Variances can't be granted based on financial situation anyway.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And I'm gonna step on your toes a little bit, Julie, not on your toes, but in your
I have a
department.
sprained ankle, so.
You're still playing tennis? But is there also a level of, I want to build a 5-story building in Victoria, it fits great for the community, and you are requiring me to do 3 stories, forget it, I'm going to Shorewood.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's where I'm like, I think there's a level of competition as a city to gain those developers where, hey, our code might just be too restrictive in today's business climate, that we have to be able to look at and possibly grant some of those variances based on the economic conditions of what the developers are seeing from other communities.
And if there's community good coming from it, I think that's the balance. There's the balance within what we need to look at when we're making approvals or denials. Like, and I think that's
The
pretty well laid
elusive
out for us,
balance.
what we should be evaluating each time. But I mean, every single developer that's gonna come here, when they come in with 7 stories, if we say, can you go to 5? They're like, yeah, it can't work. I mean, I know. It can't work. Well, everybody's gonna say that. So it's either it works in the city at 7, or we don't want it at 7, and then we have to make that call. And then they'll go back their staff and maybe come back with 5.
That's a fair point.
They do.
Well, that hopefully is what happens when the variance is out of line. We notice it's too far out of line, we say no, they go back, either they come back or they don't, or somebody comes with something better.
Yep.
That's very true. And that's real life, yeah. I mean, the one developer in particular, and I had actually asked the question, he was a former city planner. And I said, so as a former city planner, you tell us what it'll take for us to approve that. Well, it's a reasonable question, you know? And it was relative to carving out the lots a little bit differently and one variance in the process. So, you know, and again, you know, in principle, someone will develop that land. It will get developed, and it'll either be a guy over there or it'll be someone else. So, you know, ours certainly is to work with them as best we can too.
Sure. So just pulling us back, it sounds like you guys are okay with our current process for variances, final plats, final PUDs. You want to still see it all, and you don't want to be the sole decision maker on variances.
I think it's one of those issues where we revisit it in 18 months. You know, I mean, as a business method, an awful lot of stuff is going to change, is going to happen between now and 18 months. We revisit and we say, I think it worked just fine, or no, it didn't. Would be any thoughts on that in terms of agreeing or disagreeing?
The one thing I would say is with the variances, if the city council would prefer us to be the final say on variances, I would be okay with that.
Yeah, and we haven't, staff hasn't asked them that, so if that's something that you're interested in pursuing to take a little bit off their work.
Well, and any other items that you've noticed from working in other cities, or the council has like, gosh, this is something that's administrative, why can't we have the plan, we have a planning commission, we have a formal body that meets bi-weekly, you know, they can handle this to take off their plate.
I'm guessing they're still going to want to see them from the conversations that we've had with them. It sounds like they like seeing all the project components come through
Yeah.
to them. So I'm guessing they'll want to retain that, but it's something that staff can definitely ask.
And so much goes to consent that their ability and their time is really managed pretty well.
Can I ask one more question on final plats, final PUDs? Do those require a public hearing?
No.
Okay. Because I was just thinking of the notifications in the paper and all that sort of stuff too.
All the public hearings are typically done at the preliminary.
Preliminary. That's what I thought, but just wanted to make sure. So I'm good with the ordinance changes.
Yeah.
Final review plats. I guess we'd all like to see them again.
I just have one last comment on the tattoo parlors. I don't know if this matters, but Parlor Girls does cosmetic tattoos, so I don't know how.
Yeah,
Really good point.
staff is aware of that, and we're analyzing if that requires any sort of additional component, but as far as we're aware, if they're licensed through the state, staff doesn't have major,
Like makeup tattoo.
yeah. It's different from a permanent
Oh.
tattoo. It's like henna, where it goes,
You can get a beauty mark.
yeah.
People do like eyeliner or brows. That's
Brows,
really what they
yeah.
do. Just for the FYI.
So yeah, I guess maybe looking at permanent tattoos versus cosmetic.
Got it. Okay.
Any other discussion on that topic? If not, we'll move on to miscellaneous section. Brian, any other things that you'd like to bring up?
Yes, thank you, Acting Chair. A couple updates. I know we had said we would keep you guys informed of any development movements that you haven't seen. But Hunter's Glen, last night you reviewed that at the last meeting that received final plat approval last night from the City Council, as well as a revised Hunter's Brook second. They were originally approved for 109 lots. They dropped it down to 40 lots. They're going to have those 69 units incorporated with a new preliminary plat in the future, so I would expect that later this year. And then Amira was at the July 24th city council meeting, and they got preliminary approvals as well. So just in case any of you weren't aware of those applications, that's the status of those. And then also I mentioned at the last meeting about the workshop later this year. I sent out a doodle poll to you also. Check your emails if you haven't, send me your responses if you're able to. I would appreciate it, but looks like the earliest we're gonna be able to do it where everyone's able to attend so far is November, so.
So I should just target that
Yeah.
for my answers.
So keep your November meeting dates open if possible.
Oh, I may say.
And then we are also gonna discuss the shoreline ordinance tonight, that fell to the wayside, so we'll look at talking about that at the next meeting. Otherwise, that's all from staff.
Superb. Commissioners, any other topics to bring up? Any questions, concerns, issues?
I just like to state that seeing that my move in to university is the 27th, I don't think I'll be returning for another meeting. I'd just like to thank all of you for this experience throughout the summer, throughout this year. I think it's been very helpful for me learning about local government, the power it has, and I really have enjoyed this time with you guys.
Thank you, good luck.
Job.
Very
Thanks
good.
for being here.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other items that, if not, I will call for an adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.